Because if you're conscious on how you're showing up, awareness, right? And going back to learning, what can I learn from this? And focusing on the big picture.
Welcome back to yet another episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk.
I'm Jonathan Aronson.
All right, and today we are going to talk about managing up, a topic that I struggle with myself. So, Jonathan, why don't you take the lead on this and educate me on the topic?
Yeah, I suggested this today to when Henry and I were talking about what we were going to chat about, and I've run into a lot of people over the years about really struggle with managing up, and that could be your direct manager or maybe even your skip level. Um, some of it has to do with presenting, some of it has to do with career growth, or getting clarity around projects. Um, and it affects them a lot, and it's affected me personally over the years, which is actually one of the reasons I became a coach into leadership training, because I had a boss that I was unreasonable and had it out for me, and I thought, there's got to be a way in order to be able to manage that process better to get the outcome that you're looking for. Henry, you mentioned something about you're not any good at this. I don't know. Do you have any examples?
This was, there are certain aspects of management that I never really understood very well, and I never really had a great grasp. I mean, I'd have great relationships with my direct managers and skip levels, but I never really understood the concept of managing up and kind of getting them to perhaps, see the something your way, or they were always helpful in my career and stuff like that, but I never really, it's just not a thing that I really understood. Like, if you were to ask me about performance reviews or expectations, I can very confident in that area, but just managing up, never really, not something that I'm very good at.
Do you have a specific example, Henry, of where you felt you were not good at it or had a bad outcome?
Bad outcome. Well, okay, so bad bad outcome. I my personal biggest issue is communication. I'm a very direct person. So when I start moving up the food chain and discussing with my skip level and above, I do not reframe my language at all, and I tend to stay very direct. And what I've learned at, like, in the corporate environment, even though, like, I've worked at like companies like Google and Amazon, where it's just like a very flat, normal people, there's still an expectation of like a certain like executive presence, so to speak, and I don't really fit that mold very well. And so I think that it's caused me to have the wrong impression on more senior folks as a result. That's one of the areas.
So, what do you mean by executive presence?
What do I mean by executive presence? Well, first, again, my directness and my use of language. I have seen it come out where I can talk very fast. I get very passionate. Folks probably see this on the podcast. I can ramble a lot at times. I over-explain myself at times. I used to use foul language, and
Yes, I recall
uh,
that.
yeah. And so executive presence is kind of like being, not necessarily just being commanding in a room, but I feel it's just like having very precise language, controlling the framing, like having a very good grasp on framing and being clear and having people understand you. And I just never really, I think I would get nervous talking to senior folks.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
So, executive presence really is a connection, right? It's about whenever I'm coaching people on executive presence, I talk to them about, do you feel like you're a club member? Are you in the club? especially when you're going into senior leadership and you really need that executive presence. But even as a director or a manager and you're dealing with a VP, it's really about creating that connection and instilling that, I guess one is respect, and then the other would be the belief system, the trust again, in when you're talking with them. But you know, you're very typical. People are a lot of times intimidated by talking to a skip level or somebody up the food chain, as I call it. Um, and remember where they came from. It's people. I think we talked about that a little bit early in an earlier podcast. That they came from where you were. Can there be egos involved? Sure, but the whole point is um, connecting with them. And hey, listen, honestly, there are people out there that are just plain jerks who are bosses. And one of the reasons I got involved in coaching and leadership training is because I had a really terrible boss. I fear you may have recalled, maybe our listeners I mentioned to before, I used to work for a cruise line. And I ran casinos for major cruise lines and had a bunch of operations. And I was at a director level. Uh, and when I was vying for that position to be able to, right at that point, the casinos were being run by concessionaires. And um, and basically they were considering taking them in house. So um, you know, we had a new young CEO come in, and he basically um, said, "Let's take a closer look at this." Well, my boss really wanted to keep it with the concession, and he may have had personal reasons. I don't know. I never discussed that with him, but eventually what happened was it went in house, and because my current boss at the time, who was an executive VP in the company, didn't want to do this and certainly didn't want me to run it, the new CEO had me report directly to him. Okay, so now let's fast forward about 5 or 6 years. Some CEO, this guy left, we had some other CEOs. I reported back to this guy, and he had it out for me. He just had it out for me. And I didn't have the experience and the knowledge on how to manage that situation. And I ended up quitting, which to this day I regret. I've coached myself about it a ton of times, but, you know, remember I was he was an older Norwegian Sven. And, you know, uh, I remember he called me into his office and gave me a piece of paper. He says, "Jonathan, I want you to make these numbers. This is what the competition makes." And he gives me the sheet and it's all redacted as well. So I can't tell, he made it strictly for what he wanted to get across. And I said, "Well, there's stuff missing here. What's missing?" And he goes, "Don't worry about that, but you need to make these numbers." And I try to explain to him that I can't just make numbers if I don't know like what cruise it's on, where it's cruising, who are the passengers, all the things that can affect the numbers in the casino that we have data on. And he could care, he could give two shoots about that basically,
Interesting.
and I brought in a bunch of people who supported what I was saying, and basically he said, "I don't care. I don't care about what all you people have to say." And what do you do with that, right? What do you do with that? And then at one point he did bring me into his office. He goes, "Honestly," and he shut the door, "I will never repeat this, but my job is to get you out of this company by the end of the year." It was all personal, and it was like, what do you do? How do you manage that? Now, maybe if when he first gave me the piece of paper, I said to him, "Yeah, we can do this, Sven." Like I I worked at connecting with him. He lost connection with me, is what happened. And he lost trust over me not supporting him when he didn't want the casinos in house. And if given maturity I have now and the experience, I would have said, okay, great, let's sit down, look at the numbers, and figure out, you know, how we can make this, and try to partner with them more. But once I lost that connection, there was no going back. There was no going back, and unfortunately, I quit. And I think if I had the experience I had now about connecting, maybe some other people into the conversation that were more at his level, and having like the CFO about revenues and things like that, it would have made more sense. But I was intimidated. I didn't know what to do, and I quit. And to this day, like I said, I regret it. It was a great job. I loved it. And there wasn't that many of those jobs around. So that's when I got into coaching and leadership, actually. And I did thinking there's got to be a better way I can help leaders be more effective, the leaders, but I can also help people how to manage up. And I'd say, first and foremost, this executive presence, which is establishing a connection. You know, don't be a maverick. Try to meet people where they're at, and that has to do with how you look, maybe how you dress. If you're going into a meeting with your skip level, how are you showing up? I don't know. What do you think, Henry?
Yeah, I think that resonates. I've definitely been in those situations where I have assumptions, I'm not well prepared, and I don't know how to effectively communicate my intention, especially when I have a disagreement with that
Mm-hmm.
more senior person. So when you had said that, I'm curious on if you were to do this again, you would bring in other people to kind of like
Yes.
make the case. What is it if like let's say so you're the expert in the field, right?
Yeah.
And the new person coming in is like trying to come up with a strategy to execute on the expectations that they have, from their superiors. So if they disagree with the strategy that you have and you're trying to make the case that your way is maybe more appropriate for whatever the outcome needs to be, how would you then like how does that managing up part work?
Well, in this case, I would have brought the CFO in, okay, because they were equals in their level inside. What I had did is brought in other people more like in my at my level or below to support what I'm saying. So part of it is power and influence, right?
Okay.
And so, where you were saying you had this strategy and they didn't agree with it, we'll find people who might align with you, you know? Um, and, the other thing you got to do as well is like, there is a point that give it up. I mean, there are things that you might not know, that you don't know, that they're not sharing with you, that could be a reason of why they're not doing something. Like, consider maybe you don't have all the facts. On the other hand, you said something really interesting that's for sure really important. When you go talk to people, be succinct. Okay? Here's what I think, here's why I think it. What do you think, about that? Don't expect, and help them connect the dots, but don't do it in such a way that you lose them. You're an engineer, maybe into a product VP, right? Maybe the guy's not an engineer and you're trying to explain to him about the product and not really understanding maybe his needs of what he's interested in learning or knowing, what or what he needs to support you, because you're making it all about yourself
Do
and
you
not about
ask
him.
them? Do you actually be direct and say, well, what are your goals and objectives? Like very very succinct. Because I've been in a situation. I think you've coached me on this in the past, where it's
Yeah.
like I need to. I'm going into a lot of these skip levels with my agendas and what I want the
Hmm.
outcome to be, but I'm not resonating well enough with theirs. So should I dive in deeper to understand their core? Like what they're responsible for?
All right. Well, you know how I coach you. Flip it to the other side. If you were these guys and
Yeah.
somebody like you walked in, what would you want to know?
Well, it depends.
How would you communicate to this guy?
I mean, if they have a big ego, I would assume that they're like, "Who's this? Kid coming in trying to tell me how to run my business?" Yeah.
Hmm.
If they're a very empathetic leader, they may say, "This is very interesting. It's I'm let's look into this because I may have not thought of it this way." Like
Hmm.
appreciate
Okay.
like I'm the type of person that appreciates the bottom up. I don't assume that I have all knowledge in my experience, and so
Yeah.
I when someone comes to me with a new idea that I didn't think of, I'll certainly entertain it. I won't just shoot
Yeah.
it down. I've been in both situations where people are like, you know, my way or the highway, and it's actually that I've had this at Google before, and it's not the type of company you would think of where somebody would say no, thank you for your input, but no, I know better because I'm been doing this longer or something like that, and not even consider the other ideas. And I don't think that's the right approach because when the people in my team left the meeting or meeting with this senior person, they were all like, this was bizarre. Like it's just that and those are the kind of managing up situations I'm talking about that I
Okay.
really struggle with. Like that sort of thing. It's like do you just shut up and do your job, or you know?
Well, part of it is finding common ground. Don't try not to take a be polarized, meaning an either or approach, but more about that both and, right? So the idea would be curious. Can you explain to me what is it about that I'm proposing that you feel, is not going to work compared to you're seeing us wanting to do? Because I and then also make remember people react what's in it for them. So you could say, so come from that angle as well. Well, not, because what I've seen is when a lot of people I've coached, especially engineers, they go and they have this great idea, right? They're going in hard and fast on this great idea, and yet it may not be what is needed from the point of view of the senior leader. So you got to understand what's their point of view and how does your idea fit in with their point of view. And I know I've heard it before. Oh, they don't understand, and it's the engineering, and it's what this could do. And it's like, that's irrelevant because you're part of a business unit. Okay. You're part of the great business unit, and it's really how you guys collaborate and interact to get the product that they're seeking to get.
So that would mean that I'm just talking about in my experience, it's usually hard to
Yeah.
get meetings with senior management, and then when you
Uh
do,
huh.
you're trying to accomplish a lot in a short period of time. So
Yes.
how do you present it in a way where like the first meeting is, hey, let's understand the objectives really well here, because I think that now maybe our listeners can comment on this is most organizations, even if they have goals and objectives, like we used OKRs at Google, objectives and
Mm-hmm.
key results, not every organization had them well fleshed out or nimble enough to maybe react to changes in the environment and technology changes like crazy. So we would like when we're going in these meetings, like you're trying to propose a change or make a tweak or something, and it's like, how do you then get the attention of the senior person to then understand what their objectives are and how maybe they need to look at it differently, you know?
Well, certainly asking open ended questions to flush out what really that senior leader is interested in. You know, don't assume, try to find that out. Secondly, is whatever you're putting forward, you have to show why you're putting it forward. What's in back of it. And is that aligned with, do you have alignment with what senior leadership's looking for? Because remember, generally speaking, senior leadership focuses on strategy, not the tactical. You, as the engineer, are responsible for supporting the strategy. So maybe they want something and go, well, we can't do it that way. We want to do it this way. All right. but be open and curious enough to really get information of how that might or might not work from the senior leader. And don't alienate them. Don't make them sound, you talk about egos of leaders. Okay, engineers can be, they also egos. And they might come around, oh, you guys you're not getting it. It's like, listen, your job is to explain how it fits into what the strategy and what the senior leader is. And if it's not fitting in, why it's not, maybe what you could do to meet the strategy. Doesn't work the other way around. But you also said about getting into senior leaders. Be succinct. You can send an email beforehand. This is the goal of the meeting. This is what we're looking to accomplish. If you have anything other to add to it or whatever, you'd like us to focus on during this meeting, because I want to make sure that we're using our time together as succinct as possible. Who are
Mm-hmm.
you focusing on there? You or them?
Hmm.
Focusing on them. They respond to that. They appreciate that.
Now, how do you deal with a situation where you need to meet with senior leadership and your manager says that you are allowed to be present in a meeting, but you are not to speak? Only I'm going to do the talking or something like that. They get this chain of command sort of thing going. How do you approach
Yeah.
those situations?
Um, Lock your manager in his door and say, I don't know where he is. No, you know, that's a difficult situation. I would say try to get as much alignment out of with the manager before you go in on key talking points. So basically, he's your voice in a way. Um, Actually, good leaders don't do that. You go in, you kind of strategize how you're going to present it to senior leadership as a team. And maybe somebody's the lead talker, but that doesn't mean that you can't speak up and be part of the conversation. um, but why do you think some managers say, oh, I'm going to control the conversation, don't say anything? Why do you think they might say that?
I would assume that's either trust or ego.
Yeah, they're afraid you're going to say something. They also want to make sure they're seeming like the smartest manager in the room. And all that is not good leadership. I mean, that's why we're doing these podcasts, because that is not the way to lead. The way to lead is to partner with people, right? And if you're bringing your partner in, sure, you want to be succinct and be well prepared when you're going into those meetings, and decide who's going to speak about what and how you're going to present it. But then when it comes to answering questions, you guys should be there together. You guys are the subject matter experts, and usually the engineer knows even more than the manager knows,
Hmm.
so
That's right.
why not have them speak up? But, these are insecurities and egos get in the way.
Interesting. Yeah. I think in my now that we've had a little time to talk, I think a lot of the situations where I've struggled to communicate to more either my manager or more above is when they lack particular, management and leadership skills and uh, they can't work around my deficiencies. So it's like they're maybe my passion comes out too much, or I talk too fast, or something like that, and they can't say, "Hey, Henry, just slow down. Let's do this." Like they can't help me get through it. They can't compensate for that. So then it just turns into this like soured situation. Um, like I how so part of managing up also is making sure that you are communicating the outcome of your expectations and making sure that the manager is alignment. Like layoffs has been a big topic now, and I would think that being proactive perhaps with managing up to make sure that your senior leadership is aware of what your team is doing and producing would be pretty important to have. And I think that like one of the things that happen a lot is, and I've seen this throughout my career, a team knows they do good work and then the senior leadership doesn't know about it. They say, or they have no idea what
Yeah.
our value is there. And so can you walk me through the whole managing up with being able to communicate the awesome things that your team might do?
Um, yeah, that's a great point. So the reasons why they aren't speaking up is because, oh, I don't want to boast. I don't want to tell them how good I am or that kind of thing. And it could also be ego. I also don't want to speak up because I don't want to be picked apart or put myself in the limelight, so to speak. But as you just mentioned, Henry, there can be a cost to that. People don't know what's going on. So, this is really around building your own brand as well. You probably heard about, um, what's your brand inside your company? And we could have a whole show just on branding, along with the executive presence. Which maybe we should do that down the road. But um, the idea here is that you want to, where there's opportunities to share, to take advantage of that opportunity. Pique the interest. We call it planting a seed. So let's say maybe you're in a meeting on something else, and you're there with the manager in the skip level, and you're talking about the project, and maybe you're starting to close up, and you go, and you'd say, "Hey, by the way, just one other thing. I just want to tell you we're working on this new blah blah blah. I'm really excited about it, and it seems to have a huge amount of potential going forward. If you ever want to learn about more about it, let us know or let me know, and I'll be more than happy to tell you what we're doing." And they might go, "Wow, that sounds interesting. Yeah, let's set something up, or send me an email a little bit, or Slack about it, right? Take advantage of those opportunities. It's not so much self promoting; it's just giving people information, because without the information, how are they going to know?
Hmm.
You know. Maybe your manager doesn't really understand all the, there's plenty of people who are managing teams of doers, as they go. It could be the engineer or the coders or whatever, and don't really realize what this product might be capable of doing, or some of the ideas that you're coming up with. Exchanging information. What people do with that information, well, you may or may not have any influence over that. But letting them know. So planting the seed is just like, hey, I'm working on something really cool, or something we just notice may be beneficial for us to talk about. Can I send you an email on it? You know, what they do with it is up to them. But at least they're starting to get information out to them,
Hmm.
and do it in a respectful way, not a pushy way.
I see.
You could
That's great
ask
advice.
permission. Can I send it to you? You know,
What if they say no?
who says no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that does make. Yeah, that's great. That's good advice.
Now, will
Um,
they read it? Who knows?
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, we used to have a tool at work that would tell us who saw the documents. So when we would be in a follow up meeting and we were reviewing it and they would give us their opinion of things, we knew they never actually looked at it. And it's funny. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's just, I think I have had more. And actually, like part of one of the interesting things about all of this managing up is that it's usually always working around poor managers and their behaviors, and it's trying to figure out how to adapt myself to still be effective in those situations. Not every, like for example, not every manager is going to be empathetic to a delay, especially if it's caused by personal, like someone on the team is out sick or something like that. You know, most strong leaders would say 1 week is 1 week. It's like we'll make it work. And when so I think you pointed out a lot of good stuff here. It's like communicating, asking for that communication too. So if it doesn't exist, like open up those lines of communication. It's develop that, obviously prepare, develop that executive presence, which is like a very broad topic. But I think of that, it's just, don't do what I do and talk a million miles an hour and be overly passionate. Like just learn meet them where they're at, same tone that they're using. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's called mirroring, right? Is the right
Yep.
term for that. So try to mirror them. Uh, and then also, yeah, really dive into their needs. and make sure that you're meeting their needs. Now,
Their
another
need.
thing, yeah, their needs. Another thing I'll ask you is, so like maybe you're similar to me, is I struggle in corporate environments at times because I'm very entrepreneurial. I am very used to kind of the bottom up. Again, I've worked at these companies where the bottom up is very well respected, and I don't do good in corporate environments. And so, if I've always been like felt like I have to bite my tongue sometimes in meetings with senior executives because they tend to be either out of touch or they are not, everybody like kisses their butt, so to speak. And it's like nobody could be real with these folks. They're like, hey, our project is about to melt down, it's not going to work out, or it's going to be wildly successful. You need to be like more prepared for it, or something like that. And I've always bit my tongue, and I'm like, I just like it. It just it feels foreign to me. Like, is there any
Mhm.
advice that you would have for kind of like, am I? Is it? Do you think that's normal? And the reason that I'm saying it is like because I'm entrepreneurial, I feel like I'm the only one that feels this. Is because I'm not afraid to speak up in these environments. That's what I mean
Yeah.
by entrepreneurial. It's like I am not. I have no fear for that. That's what I mean by that.
Why do you think people are fearful about speaking up?
Oh well, folks are not willing to maybe put their job at risk, or they don't
Yeah.
want, or maybe they're up for promotion and they don't want to impact that.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's like corporate environments are very funny sometimes, and they require a certain type of navigating, which I am not good at. you know,
Yeah.
uh,
So again, it's adapting to the environment, and not doing the either or thing. And not saying you're not good at. This can be a learned skill. I want listeners to understand. Just because your natural tendency is not to act a certain way doesn't mean that it has to be that way, because if you're conscious on how you're showing up, awareness, right, and going back to learning, what can I learn from this, and focusing on the big picture, then you have an opportunity to have a conversation. Managing up is tricky. I'm not gonna say it's trickier than managing down for sure, right? Or managing even a peer. It's tricky, because there's this power dynamic, whether said or unsaid, and that's what you're navigating. So be respectful, be curious, plant seeds, be well prepared, um, create an environment of executive presence where you're showing up and you're connecting, and you have a much better opportunity of getting the outcome that you're looking for, which at least is planting the seed, or at least having some kind of collaborative information. Now, are there egotistical people out there, bosses, and entertain you? Yeah, I'm not going to tell you there's not, but it's at their loss and their detriment that they're not open to hearing you. And all you can do is what you have control over. And that's what this podcast was about, which is understanding what are the challenges that you're going to have managing up, and how to circumvent or navigate around those challenges. And hopefully, the audience got some value out of today's conversation.
yeah, that's great. One question you mentioned using these opportunities as a learning experience. How would you recommend you kind of reflect on these to try to learn? Is this more of you want to pay attention to like response? Like, what would you suggest we do?
Well, I think it's like any other relationship. Take note of what people seem to react to, right?
Hmm.
What's the things they seem interested in? What do they get excited about? What do they not like? Like leaders want specific deadlines. Others like more loosey goosey. If your leader wants specific deadlines, say, hey, we could get this to you in 10 days. Okay, that's like April the 30th, and if that's what they like, it strengthens that connection. Oh, I like how Henry's thinking here. Okay, Henry, April 30th, get back to me. Let me know what you got.
Hmm.
That's the thing. So notice how the people are and what jazzes them and then what annoys them.
I
Pay
see.
attention.
So what you're saying is I need to create an artificial intelligent persona of my boss and skip level so I can ask have these like hypothetical situations and see how they would respond, right?
Well, again, you're looking to connect, and with anybody you're
Yeah.
looking to connect, you said it earlier, meet them where they're at. So pay attention, write notes if you need to, and if you're more cerebral, then create a chart of how people are. It's for you; doesn't have to be for anybody else. And then refer to that when you're going into a skip level meeting, so you're well prepared, not just on the information, but how you're going to present the information that might excite the person
I see.
or
Yeah,
get on your page.
because what you're basically getting at is that even if you understood what their needs are, maybe like at a company objective level,
Hmm.
like and what they're rated on, they may, like you had said, there could be a leader that prefers that hard deadline or that quick, swift deadline versus a loose deadline, but maybe like a more robust feature set or something like that that you're delivering.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
That's great. This is good. Great. Thank you, Jonathan. This is very helpful, and
Thank
hopefully,
you, Henry.
folks listening got a lot out of that. So, anything else that we close with here?
No, I think certainly if anybody has any questions or challenges managing up right now and they would like to get some ideas of maybe how to approach it, feel free to write us. We'll be more than happy to respond to you. And this is a learned skill and it is part of leadership because you go up into the leadership roles, you're going to be having to, you know, interact a lot more with other leaders in the organization and senior leaders. And it's a really great skill to learn. So I encourage you all to take what we took away, what we mentioned in the podcast. And again, if you have any questions, please reach
Yeah,
out.
fantastic. Our contact information is in the description. You can always leave a comment. We'd love to get back to you, and you can reach Jonathan with direct questions as well. Don't forget, if you've made it this far and you haven't done so yet, please like this episode and subscribe so we can feel very encouraged to keep this podcast going. And thank you again for listening. I'm Henry Kirk,
And I'm Jonathan Aronson.
and you have been listening to the Leadership Lab. Thank you.